Welcome to the Sigma Empath podcast. I'm your host, Vital Germain. In this episode,
Needy doesn't exist, just like too sensitive doesn't exist. There is no such thing as someone who's too needy.
It has to go towards me learning how to trust myself.
Emotional dark ages.
We are absolutely in the emotional dark ages.
Have we regressed?
There is no negative emotion. And then you'll be like, well, hang on.
Ariane, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I found you on Instagram, and it was as a result of an incredibly powerful reel that touched me deeply. It impacted a lot of viewers, and I want to dive into your journey, your story, your mission, your purpose. Give us the short version. Who are you and what do you do?
I am Ariane. The best way you could describe about what I do is I would say that I'm an intuitive, healing, self-development and mindset transformational coach. And that's a bit of a tongue tie. But basically, I teach people how to get through self-doubt, how to resolve and integrate unconscious beliefs and trauma, how to understand themselves through raising self-awareness. I basically teach people the tools and give them what they need to be able to understand themselves better and to the deepest way in order to be able to achieve anything they want in their life, whatever that is, whether it's going down a path of career or whether it's healing their emotional wounds, whether it's trying to be able to set boundaries, grow confidence, whatever that is.
So you use the word intuitive, and it's a very powerful word, and it's a word that gets thrown out there a lot. Can you quickly share with us when you leverage that word as a part of the description of what you do? Can you help us into your world? What does that mean for you? And what does it represent? And how does that influence the people that you work with your intuitive approach?
Intuitive is a part of the being that in society we've learned and been taught to reject and disown and deny. Our intuition, we've got 3 brains. I think it's even they've come out, there's scientists that have come out that have talking about they've been able to find brain cells in the heart and the gut as well. So we've got the brain in the head, the mind, brain, let's say, and then the heart and then the gut. In terms of spirituality, the gut is the connection, or you say like my intuition. But again, that is also part of the being. So it's not just the gut, but it's the brain part of the gut, let's say. It's the intelligence of the gut or the heart, which allows you to connect and understand. So I use my intuition to be able to understand someone. That has to go towards me learning how to trust myself in what's coming up. For example, if I ask you a maths question, in your mind, you'll be like, okay, what's 2 and 2? You'll work it out and you'll be like, 4, that's the answer. You're trusting your own process, your own understanding, your own intelligence of figuring out what that complicated, or they're not complicated, but what that problem is, what that solution is. And it's the same thing. It's using the heart and the gut to understand, connect, energetically connect to the other person, to come to the awareness of what it is that's causing whatever they're talking about.
And I do love this concept of the heart. I subscribe to what's called the Heart Math Institute. And going along with what you talked about, the Heart Math Institute has done a lot of scientific research about the power of the heart and how it emits a frequency that actually goes beyond our physical body. Also, what is absolutely fascinating is that the heart sends more signals to the brain than vice versa. Yet we view the brain as the mind, whereas the heart is actually a more powerful mind, and it is basically the cradle of our intuition, of our knowing without knowing, to the divine source. So I completely go on board with that. I want to get a little bit into your background, because most people find a sense of purpose. It usually comes as a result of having personally navigated and overcome trauma. Some people leverage pure academia.
Mhm.
You've gone through stuff. I feel it in your passion. I feel it in your messaging. Would you kind of mind sharing some of the challenges that you faced and why it compelled you to do the healing work that you do, inspiring and empowering others, because it's powerful?
Yeah. It's funny, I was thinking about this about an hour ago, but obviously it's understandable why now, because it allows me to talk about this part of the story. I was the anxious attachment. I was the scapegoat of the family. I
Before
came
you go
from...
too far, break down real quick. Anxious attachment. What is that for the
So
viewers
there's
who?
relationship attachment styles that we have based on the experiences we've had in our lives and kind of like what it teaches us, which a group of behaviors based on the trauma that we've had, we're saying like, oh, that person is more anxious attachment style, that person is more avoidant attachment style, you've got like secure, you've got multiple attachment styles. I would highly recommend everyone to do research into what attachment style there are. There are tests all over the internet you can do. You just answer some questions and they kind of tell you what attachment style you are. It's one of the most valuable things you will ever do. And then I was the scapegoat. The scapegoat is, again, a family dynamic. So your social circle is your family circle, your first ever social circle. In the time that we live in, which is the emotional dark ages, we're not...
We are now in the emotional dark ages.
We are absolutely in the emotional dark ages
Or
collectively.
have we regressed because we went through the Enlightenment period? We went through the Renaissance. We've now reached this level where we're, according to some believers, we're going to the new realm. We're going into, what is it, 5D. Yet we're in the emotional dark ages. It sounds like a contradiction. Help me understand this.
Well, going into the whole concept of going into the 5D is more about the awakening, waking up from the behaviors, let's say. But that doesn't necessarily mean, we're waking up whilst being in the emotional dark ages. It's not a contradiction of each other. What I mean by the emotional dark ages is that we live in a time where collectively humanity, or societies in humanity, don't understand how to be there for themselves, each other, in an emotionally healthy way. To the degree where what we deem to be normal in society, so many things are actually very, very unhealthy behavior. The way we try to help each other, the way we connect with each other, the way we treat ourselves. And we see so many behaviors as, oh, that's normal, which in itself is a conversation. But that is why we live in the emotional dark ages. Because honestly, if we understood to the degree of what is emotionally healthy, we would treat our children differently. We would treat ourselves differently. We would treat our co-workers, our partners, our siblings, our friends. We would treat our parents. Everyone would treat everyone very, very differently if a lot of people, well, if we understood it collectively. When I work with someone and they're learning these concepts, it's not until honestly about 6 months of really hard working, usually they turn around and go, I understand what you mean by the emotional dark ages now. That's kind of like how unconscious we are to it. It takes a long time to fully grasp and understand what that means, because you have to really do the work yourself. And when you're doing the work, you're realizing I'm constantly healing from experiences that I've had, from the people around me, from my first social circle, from my family. And you get to a place of going, wow, like no one knew how to be there for me. And then you're learning all of these things. You're learning about boundaries. You're learning about yourself and how to be there for yourself and how to meet your own needs, and why just kind of the whole cry it out and sit on the bottom step and ignoring technique is the reason we have all these traumas. And you're like, wow, everyone's doing it. But then even at that stage, you're still nowhere near really seeing the depth of it. The more you do, the more you see. And everyone that I'm either working with or communicating with, even myself and my partner, we do the work, and the more, she does the work, she's saying to me as well, like, I really see what you mean. It's like, yeah.
It is an ongoing journey. The work is an ongoing journey. And by the way, I was challenging you not to challenge you, but for understanding and clarification, because I completely subscribe and understand what you mean. I promote empathy, which I view as a level of enlightened, conscious awareness of humanity, of external factors, but also of the self. Through empathy, you are striving to understand, and if you're striving to understand, it means you're reaching to learn and to grow. So I completely subscribe. I want to go back to your personal journey. You talked about a specific attachment style, and you talked about the scapegoat.
Yeah. So the scapegoat.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So the scapegoat essentially is in your first family circle, and this is why we were talking about the emotional dark ages. We're living in a time where people don't know how to be there for each other. So we're all just reacting. This is what unconscious is. To live unconsciously, which is what survival mode is just to continuously react to anything that's coming up within yourself.
Yeah.
So you have a family circle, whether it's 3, 4, 5 people, 6 people, and you've got like the golden child, and the golden child is the one who learns that I have to be this version of myself and behave like this and conform to what is expected of me in order for me to feel safe, because that's where people don't scold me, that's where I don't get shouted at, that's where I don't get told off. So I need to completely abandon myself, all of my needs, what I want, and just be this version of myself that people want me to be. So the golden child is the one that completely loses the self in order to conform.
Now, is this something you personally went through? Did you feel you lost yourself in order to conform? And then if so...
So that's the golden child. I was the scapegoat.
Got it.
So the scapegoat is the one that can't conform. And because the scapegoat can't conform, the scapegoat is the one that like will call unhealthy behavior out. Be like, why are we treating each other like this? That's not okay. Why don't we do this? Why? Well, when dad's angry because of something else, why is he taking it out on me? So there's and behaviors as well. Like, let's say for me, when I was younger, all my friends in school had girlfriends. I wasn't allowed one. So I had one in secret, and then I got caught for having a girlfriend. And then my brother would be like, why don't you just listen to them? He was the golden child. It's like, because I don't want to. It doesn't make sense. It used to frustrate me so much when I used to ask something, and then my parents would go, because I said so. And I'm like, that makes no sense. What do you mean because I said so? So the scapegoat is the one that can't conform, and which leads to questions where there shouldn't be questions, let's say, or they're expected not to be questions. And what that does is it triggers the people around them. So the behaviors that they have, what they say, what they do, will trigger mom or dad. And because we're all living unconsciously, what happens is mom or dad or any caregiver is feeling their own wounds, and then they're looking at that person as the cause of it. That person is what caused me feeling like this. So I'm going to project and take this out onto that person because they're the cause. And this is why the scapegoat is like the family, the problem child of the family, the black sheep of the family.
By the way, I totally relate, and I'm sure a lot of listeners are the scapegoat. There's also the sort of the generational curse. We are breaking this generational lineage of conformity. Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting word, how we don't conform. And conformity is a level that I view as a level of submission where we can't challenge the status quo. Even if the status quo can be healthy, let's at least consider and entertain alternatives. And we sort of poke and invite people to consider an alternative. But unfortunately, to your point, a lot of people are married to what they've been told, indoctrinated, and that defines their identity, and they cling to it.
They cling to it, and you can't. You're not even in an environment where you can have a healthy conversation about that. You're not even in an environment where you can say like, hey, I don't agree with what's going on. Let's possibly try and change it. That would be met with, what are you, ridiculous? Like, what do you mean? That's ridiculous. Like, why do you always do this? Why do you always act like this? And then everyone starts jumping on and, yeah, why do you always do this? And because the scapegoat becomes the trash bin of everyone's emotional baggage.
So why do you do this? Because and I know why I do it, but it invites resistance. I'm sure there are a lot of people now listening in who relate to this dilemma. Why do you do it? What's the consequences, or what's the burden of honoring, living authentically, and challenging the status quo? It's got to weigh heavy at times, surely.
So this kind of leads to the original question. We do it because we can't conform. We just can't. It was a decision before we came here to be the type of behavior that cannot conform. And what happened to me was, after being in so much pain, and we come from Iran. I was born in Iran. We were in the Iran-Iraq war. 5 years old, we came here. So I went through war as well. I went through a lot of trauma in my childhood. And we were literally living in survival physically as well as emotionally as well. And I got to the stage where I tried everything, every single thing. And there was actually...
when you say you tried everything, can you give us a couple of examples that people can actually...
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, when you're in pain, you reach for anything. So that's alcohol, weed, that's shopping, sex, food, whatever it is, whatever that can calm the fiery rage of what's happening, what's going on. And there was actually it's a double moment. My previous partner, the breakup is what led me to my spiritual awakening, to learn all of this, to do this.
Usually a defining moment, yes.
Exactly. But I remember the partner before that, or two partners before that, I split up with that partner, and I was in all of my pain, and I had no idea what was going on at this point. And there was 3 times in my life that I was this close from killing myself. That was one of them. And I remember eventually when and I say this in quotes, got out of that, I promised myself that I would never go back there. I was like, I'm never going to go back to being, that person, to be in that much pain. And I was confident, and I was like, I eventually, after years, got to that stage where I was confident. I was like, yes. And then my last partner, the relationship that I had with her ended, and it took me back there. And I remember thinking, I said that I was never going to do this. And I believed that I never would, because of how confident I was. And I was like, what happened? Like, what was that? And that, along with a few other things, made me change my focus to looking within. It made me change looking externally from me to going, what's going on here? Like, what's happening here? Because I said that I would never, ever come back here, and I'm back here.
So is the common error of a lot of people is because we focus too much on the external rather than because for me, we had a similar transformation. We have a similar path, by the way. I was born in the Belgian Congo during a time of civil war. I don't remember it intellectually. Energetically, I've absorbed it. So I understand that conflict that's happening within you energetically. I understand the conflict, the darkness of wanting to end your life. I actually did. I actually slit my wrist at one point. And like you, I promised I would never be that person again, or I would never allow somebody that power over me. It wasn't one person, but one person pushed me over the edge, so to speak.
Yeah.
It was a build-up. A lot of people are going through these dark nights, and we can romantically say, I made this decision, this was never going to happen. Talk us a little bit through. You went internally, but what were some of the steps that you literally had to look in the mirror and say, I need to do these following things in order to come out of the dark, in order to survive, thrive?
I I wasn't even thinking about thriving. I was thinking just about surviving. I remember that I was sat on my computer table and my parents were there with me because I was in a really bad state. And I said to them, why does everything always happen to me? Why is, what? And this wasn't like a kind of a complaint. It was a true, like, even my mum said that that's the moment you started looking at yourself. And it was like the most deepest, realest thing that I've ever said up until that point. I was like, what is going on? And it made me look at me to go, not like I'm the issue, but to go, what's happening? What's going on? And I was seeing a therapist at the time as well. And the therapist said a few things that really kind of blew me away, in terms of, I didn't even know it existed. The therapist started talking about self-love, and I was like, what? You can't love yourself. Like, what do you mean self-love? That's not a thing. What are you talking about? And it took me down a rabbit hole of learning about self-love and what that is. And I was like, you can love yourself? Like, what is that? So it got me to just look within. And I remember there was this one moment where I watched a YouTube video and there was a woman just talking about, all right, just let that anxiety take over. Like, it's okay, I'm here with you. And I was like, just watching it, I was like, what? Let the anxiety take over. So, what? And I was like, why?
Is that acceptance or is that submission, Ariane? Is that acceptance or is that submission?
So it depends on what you mean by submission, because essentially it could be both. And it depends on what the term and what you're meaning. It's absolutely acceptance, because it's a part of you coming forward and it's you starting to accept that part of you. It's the start of it. But I remember seeing that, and I remember in the video she was saying, just do it for 1 minute at a time. And I was like, okay. So I had so much anxiety. My therapist at the time actually said I had an anxiety disorder and CPTSD, and my anxiety was waking me up throughout the night. It was so high. So I thought, okay, next time I get woken up, I'll do it. And right at that point, I was staying at my friend's house. Like, I didn't even have a house. I was in a really terrible situation. I was staying at my friend's house in the spare room, and my anxiety woke me up the next day. So I thought, okay, here we go. We're going to do this. And I put my timer on for 1 minute, and I just allowed the anxiety to take over, and all this fear was under the sensation of anxiety, and it came up. And I remember thinking like, I need to get my friend. And then I caught myself kind of coaching myself through it, being like, no, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Remember, we're just doing this for a minute. Just wait for the minute. And I was like, okay. All right. I was like, no. And then I was like, no, it's okay. Then I did a minute eventually, after coaching myself like 3 or 4 times. And I was like, whew, okay, everything's okay. And then I remember feeling better. And I was like, whoa, like I feel better. What is that? So then it happened again. It came up and I went for it again. I was like, let's go. And I did it again, and it happened again. And it got to the stage where I was like excited when it happens, because every time I did it, I felt better. And then I started recognizing that I felt like how I wanted to feel, which I was trying to get externally from me. So I'd reach out to my ex and be like, we should give this another go. I think we gave it wrong. This was not a good idea, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I feel like I would if she would have said, oh, okay. And I was like, oh, this feels great. Like this, I just want to do this. Like, I don't want to go out anymore. I want to just sit inside and do this.
That's really powerful.
It was so powerful. And it eventually led me to actually a meditation. It was a heart activation meditation. And I never forget when I was putting my awareness on my heart, the floodgates of that connection that I had with so many parts of myself, and this was my Kundalini awakening, poured out. It forced itself so far and so aggressively out that I had to actually become aware, because I was crying so hard that I could feel my neck about to snap. I was like, oh my God. Like, and I remember I had to calm myself down. I had to talk to myself, and I was like, it's okay, just calm down. Because I was like, I couldn't breathe. My neck was about to like snap. And it was so powerful. But then after I calmed myself down, I remember thinking like, this is everything that I've been looking for. Constantly going out, constantly trying to connect with my ex, constantly trying to get everything from everyone to calm my anxiety down. That's why I was constantly looking outside of me. That's why I was constantly allowing people to just be the way they were towards me, because I was like, oh, well, you know, I got to be friends with them, and I can't upset them. Otherwise, they might not want to be friends with me. And I realized it was, and that's when it made sense, when everyone was saying everything you want is from within. And I was like, that's what it means.
And I went through, again, a very similar journey, maybe not as intense. But when I say that, let me sort of validate that. The night that I decided to slit my wrist, that was the feeling that I had.
Mm.
It was the accumulation of everything happened in one night. And I'd done all the exercises prior, the meditation, I'd done everything, but this one night was too much. I felt suffering at a point that I couldn't embrace. I lost hope, and I made one choice that luckily I'm still here to talk about it, and now share the light, share the experience. But all the things you talked about, I've done. Like, for example, you said to just be with the pain, right? I'd done it up until then. Sometimes the pain would last a minute. Sometimes it would last 2 days. Sometimes it would last a week. But I allowed it to be. And I found great comfort and solace in allowing it to be. Let it pass through me. Now, I want to go back to something you talked about, the term self-love. I have the same thing. I still grapple with that term. Like, self-love, is that possible? This is how I package it for myself so that I can embrace it, is I translate self-love as to self-respect, self-honor, self-care. I think love is something we give to the world. We don't take it, but I know that self-love brings great value to a lot of people. With all this journey that you went through, and I kind of went off on a tangent to maybe get to a kind of a question. These really dark moments, do they come back sometimes, and are you now equipped, or is healing this thing for you where I've faced it, I've overcome it, and now I can move on because it's never going to happen again? But some people think healing is that linear.
Healing is, I think talking about self-love is a very important thing as well. Healing is more of, let's say, linear, but on a mountain. Let's say it's very easy to seem like I've done so much work, but I'm back. And that's not what's going on. There are parts of you that are ready to come to your awareness when you're at that stage. There are so many parts of me that has come to my awareness, let's say, in the last 3 weeks that weren't ready, and I wasn't able to get to 2 years ago. And sometimes it's like really deep. There was last week, I was sat in the shower in the water, and I was in a lot. I went to a deep, deep part of myself, and I was in a lot of pain. But what happens is people kind of like go through that experience later on in their journey, and it feels like they're either going backwards or not progressing. And it's more like going up a mountain. So you would like feel really, really good, and then the let's say the dark times, the painful times, it's not you go back down there. You go up, and then you go there, and then you go up again, and then you go there, and then up again. So you are progressing. In terms of self-love and what healing essentially is. You know, you heard the term shadow work, and shadow work encompasses everything on a self-development journey, healing journey. We go through our lives, have experiences that cause us to reject, deny, or disown parts of ourselves. And we put these parts of ourselves somewhere we don't have conscious awareness of, because it's too overwhelming to experience what they are experiencing. So if I'm in an experience where there's a lot of fear, with that being too overwhelming, one of the ways, well, the primary way that we protect ourselves is that we experience a split in the consciousness, and the part of ourselves that is experiencing that, we become as unaware of it as we can be. Additionally, as well, we adopt another part of ourselves that has certain behaviors that keep us safe from that overwhelming experience. Now, these parts of ourselves, whether they're hundreds or thousands of parts of ourselves in the unconscious parts of our being, you know, a lot of people, whether you want to call it the subconscious, it's the unconscious part of yourself. Whatever you are unconscious of, we put it in the place that we call it is the human shadow. So shadow work is to go into the shadow of, which is the part of ourselves that we are unconscious of, and then to bring it to the light of our consciousness. That's the difference between light and shadow. Light is conscious, shadow is unconscious. There is no like evil, dark connotations to shadow, or, you know, the dark and the shadow. No, it's just what you're unconscious of. That's all it is. So by the best way that I've heard self-love to be described is to take one on as a part of yourself, so that if I make a decision that would hurt that would hurt me, because I've taken them on as a part of me. And it's very easy for us to see our children like this as well, to, you know, because they're the closest kind of examples to someone who's maybe not doing the work. Now, we are like that with others, and we are like that with ourselves, because we are an ecosystem. One of the most important things that a single human will do is to start seeing themselves for truly what they are, which is an ecosystem, which is multiple parts, multiple personalities. You are not one being in terms of one part. So we have all of these parts that we are putting somewhere we're unconscious of, unaware of. That is a form of rejection. And then, because we are rejecting that experience, we're rejecting that part of ourselves by putting it somewhere that we are unaware of. Now, what's self-love? Self-love is to accept and to take on as a part of ourselves. Whenever we're triggered, and triggered is like a very kind of shameful viewpoint word at the moment in today's society, which is ridiculous. But triggered is like, you know, we're talking about how we work. Whenever we're triggered, and you can be triggered through anything, through a thought, through a social media post, through your friend turning up, through the TV, like anything can trigger you. A smell.
Yeah, a smell, definitely smell.
Smell, a touch, anything. So you get triggered to be angry. That's actually a part of you coming to your awareness. That's actually your entire human being is actually built to give you, which is the conscious driver, feedback. So when you are triggered, that's feedback. That's your system going, hey, there's a part of you that is causing you to be out of alignment of your natural healthy self. And this is that part of you. Now, it's not to be, you know, negative towards that part or to be horrible towards that part. It's just feedback. This is what it is. That's the whole purpose of a trigger. A trigger is to go, hey, this part of you is causing you to be out of alignment of your natural healthy state.
I agree with that. It's the universe sending you a signal that something is wrong, something needs to be addressed, something needs to change. And unfortunately, anger is viewed as this negative emotion. I view anger, to your point, it's a positive emotion. What makes it negative is what I do with it.
Well, no, I to be honest with you, I don't even I don't like labeling any emotion as positive or negative.
It is what it
Because
is.
what it does is if I label any of them as positive, then I have to label some of them as negative. There has to be contrast. There has to be opposite. Now, there is no negative emotion. And then you'll be like, well, hang on. Fear is a negative emotion. I don't like feeling fear. That's a negative. Fear has its
Value.
values. So when I'm stood in front of a car and it's going to make me 90 miles an hour, fear will make me jump out of the way and save my life. When I'm walking on the edge of the mountain, fear will make me be very careful, which will save my life. So fear has its benefits, which means it's not a negative emotion. So the way I describe them and talk about them is there's either undesirable emotions or desirable emotions. And if you start looking at them like that, you go, yeah, I understand it has its value, but it's undesirable to me. And that's understandable. Like, it would be ridiculous if anyone would say, hey, you should enjoy fear. Like, no, it's literally created and it's made for me it's like the biggest warning signal that something's wrong and something's happening. So, and the same with anger. Anger has its values, has its benefits. It shows you what is not okay with you. It shows you someone's crossing your boundary. It makes you stop unhealthy or bad behavior. So it has its benefits. But then we live in a society, emotional dark ages, because if society
That's what I was
understood.
referring to. Society labels anger as this negative. I'm glad you clarified that because that's where I was going. It's labeled as a negative emotion. And I also want to add to what you've built is that as sentient beings, our purpose, the reason why we're here is to feel.
That's so true. It's insane.
But yet we're programmed, we're told to not experience our emotions because there's shame and there's guilt. Going back to the scapegoat, those of us who acknowledge our feelings will leverage them to either challenge something that we feel is unjust, etc. I mean, we could go down this morality path, but it's a very powerful topic we could elaborate on. I do want to quickly move forward, though. One of the many things that I admire since I've met you on your platform, you have a level of courage, authenticity, and insane vulnerability. Insane. Where did that come from? And where and how did you, because I promote and talk a lot about living authentically, which means owning your story. When and how did you develop this courage to say, you know what, I'm going to show the world my darkness, my traumas, my challenges, but also my successes? When did this moment, did it all happen at the same time, or did this come years later because you own it with dignity, pride, inspiration? You inspired me, which is why we're here.
Well, thank you very much for that, first of all. It was a collection of realizations that happened throughout my journey. But the biggest one that really got me to that stage was as I was learning this stuff, as I was learning healing, like what this is, I was learning, oh, this is what the imagination is. Oh, this is what this emotion does. Oh, jealousy is just a communication to tell me what I want, but I feel like I'm not good enough to have. It's not this terrible thing. Oh, okay, anger is telling me that what's not okay with me. Fear is a warning. Like, oh, okay, all these things. And then I was like, wait, this is how I work. Like, I was like, this is how we work. That's it. That's literally it. And then I was like, oh yeah. And the whole, when I'm putting things out there and someone's like, a few people like, oh, I watched your, post and it's really cringy. And then I learned, I was like, well, that's your shame being triggered. It's just your shame. And I was like, this is how we work. And other people are just being triggered. So then I kind of went, well, what are other ways that we work? And I was like, well, we walk in a certain way. That's a way we work. Our heart pumps blood in our body, and no one's shameful about that. No one's going, that's weird. And So then I was like, this is just how we work. And I'm going to show people that this is how we work. And that's kind of like, the gravity of the pain that I was in, the suffering that I was stuck in, that led me to 3 times in my life being this close to killing myself. And then understanding that the reason I got there was simply, and not easy, but simply, I just didn't know how I worked emotionally. That was it. If I knew how I worked emotionally, I wouldn't have been where I was.
And I think that's a powerful lesson for people to go, again, going back to the beginning of going inward, understanding who you are, how you function, accepting it, embracing it, leveraging it. And then what you do next is basically up to you. But I think authenticity is something this is the part that I find very interesting about society. Everybody wants to be authentic. We kind of have this desire, I want to show the world who I am. And then you get those who've understood, well, if I show the world who I am, to your point, we all do it. If I show the world who I am, I'm afraid to lose friends. I'm afraid to be judged. But we're all dying to show who we are. And we wear a mask and we realize, oh, well, if I wear this mask, I get these results. But deep down inside, that voice of authenticity is dying to show the world. And again, you, through your courage, you inspired me, and I know you inspire your insane following on Instagram. And by the way, real quick, where can people find you on Instagram? What is your Instagram handle?
So my Instagram handle is just everywhere, on every social media. It's just my name, Ariane Samui.
I will put it below in the checkout right there below. That's where they can find you. You're a coach. You inspire. And I want to quickly, in closing, the one reel that blew me away because there was so much passion, conviction, being needy. I've been accused of being needy. I've accused people of being needy. If you can, give us the short version of this breakdown and understanding of what needy really means and how it's this sort of incorrect, invalid term that we throw on people.
Yeah. It's actually one of the most viewed videos that I've got. It's being too needy. It's the whole you're too needy, you're too much. We are creatures of needs. So we actually have needs that need to be met. The way we work as human beings is that if we have unmet needs, we essentially struggle. We go towards annihilation. You have a need for food and water. If you don't meet that need for food and water, you will die.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, so you have needs. Yeah. If you have these needs of food and water and you don't eat for 4 days or drink for 4 days, what is going to be your main priority in life? It's not going to be to do a podcast. It's not going to be to, fill your paperwork and do your admin. It's not going to be to post a video on social. It's going to be to find food, because the need that you have in that moment of food and water is so high because you have been starved of that, of what you need. So your attention, your behavior is going to be very different. If I was saying, hey, let's do a podcast, you'd be like, no, I'm too hungry, I can't. There's a very different behavior than if that need was met in that moment. You'd be like, sure, great, let's do a podcast. So you would behave differently. Now, we as emotional beings that think, not thinking beings that feel emotions, we are emotional beings that think. We live in the emotional dark ages, which causes us to be brought up in a way that we experience so much trauma that we actually don't have many of our needs met. The need for connection. And the need for connection for a human being is actually more important for our survival than the need for food and water. And you can see this because when most people are like break up or they're going through something really bad, they don't feel like eating because their connection is so missing that they don't even feel like eating. Now, connection for a human being is the most important thing that we need. An infant, this is how we've evolved. An infant that is born would die 100% of the time if you left them on their own. We were watching the show Vikings, and in the show, the way they showed the way that they, killed babies that were deformed or something is they just leave them in the woods. By leaving an infant on their own, they're completely dead. It's like we're a joke in terms of the species. You see a horse that's born 20 minutes later, the horse is walking around. An human infant, cannot survive on their own. And one of the reasons why we love each other so much, and that love connects us, is to ensure the survival of our species. So that emotional connection between the caregivers and the child is the survival of the human being. Now, that emotional connection is rejected and lost many times throughout our childhood, through being scolded, through being told that I'm not allowed to be who I am, by rejecting the parts of myself that I've learned to reject in order to conform and be this version of myself that I need to be.
I want to quickly build on what you just said there about the disconnect to the inner child. I promote a lot of creativity, and that ties in exactly what you say. So children hear on average 232 no's or negative comments a day. Don't do that. Stop doing this. Get down from there. We annihilate the essence of that soul.
Of curiosity.
We disconnect that child from its soul. That's wow.
So what we're doing essentially is we're shaping and molding. No, don't do that. I'm teaching you how to be. And if you don't listen, then I take away the thing that you rely on for your survival, which is connection. And I do that through scolding you. I do that through showing you that it's not okay. I do that for telling you to go to your room, sitting you on the noise step, letting you cry it out. And everything that we do removes that connection. And when we lose that connection, that's trauma. We feel annihilation. And we experience this hundreds, if not thousands of times in our lives. And we get to an age where we, define as an adult. And then just like when you don't eat food for many days and your behavior would be like, okay, I need to go find food. It's a very different behavior than if you would have eaten lunch and we were at dinner and we were just talking. I'd be like, hey, how you doing? And this is the example I use. If you're walking the desert and you don't eat for 6 days and you're only surviving by drinking urine from your pants, let's say, and then you eventually find a house, you're going to sit down and they put a plate of pasta in front of you. That would be the way you eat that pasta. You'd be like shoving that food in your mouth, saying, more water, I want more. It would be vastly different than if you and I were to sit down, have a meal together, but we ate yesterday, we had lunch today, and the behavior would be very different because the need for food and water would be very, very high. And this is the same thing. There's so many people that are behaving in a way that is being labeled as too needy.
Yes.
And it doesn't exist. You are not being too needy. You are being the correct level of needy. Because just like if we saw someone who didn't eat for days and days, I wouldn't go, hey, you're being way too needy. I know you've not eaten food for 6 days. If after walking the desert, if I sit down and someone goes, hey, you need to relax. Like the way you're eating that food is like you're way too needy. Doesn't make sense.
I completely agree with you, and that ties in with my core message about empathy. If we had more empathy and we were able to understand the circumstance, the situation, the emotional, mental, spiritual mindset of a certain person, if I could understand, he has been through the desert. This man is dying of thirst. Of course, he's not going to sip from the delicate little teacup at 4 o'clock. Of course, he's not going to do that. If society in general had the empathy, the emotional intelligence, the awareness to understand that, we could provide each other's needs more often. Instead, what do? We judge, we condemn, magnifying the issue of the need. because now
Well,
I've
that's it,
done.
and because everyone and because everyone around you does it, it makes you feel like you're the one who's wrong.
Wow. On that note, I'm hungry. I need lunch before I get too needy. Ariane, it's been such a pleasure. This is my gratitude cup. I'm grateful that we connected via. Go check out his Instagram page. So much passion, so much insight. If you need coaching, if you need guidance, I highly recommend this man. Just as you heard in this podcast, an absolute joy, an absolute pleasure. Go get some food, go get some water, and please stay connected with me.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it.